Welcome to Anthony's Outdoors, and in this episode, Mike here is going to demonstrate how to butcher a rear hind quarter. Now, usually at camp, I'm in charge of taking the animal and separating out all the quarters, back straps, and tenderloins. And then it is up to Mike to do the deboning process, which takes a little more finesse, which I don't have. So I'm going to give it to Mike here, and he's going to speak throughout the video, demonstrating how to separate this ham.
First things first, you need a sharp knife, and I like to start off by cleaning any of these excess layers of fat. This was a doe, so typically they're a little bit fatter than most bucks are. Just start trimming that off. Make sure you cut into the fat and don't cut down into the meat. You don't want to do that. You want something like that. So start peeling off all of that. All right, now we've cleaned off most of the large chunks of the fat. I like to take the actual hind quarter and put it on the outside facing up, and right in the middle you'll actually see a seam. Usually there's a piece of fat that runs along here. That's where I like to start. And when you're doing this, you actually do not have to cut any meat. All of it is basically fat or these little like tissues that are holding the thing together like that. So you can almost take it out with your finger if you wanted to. But what I like to do, go in there, just start slowly cutting away. And this entire piece will actually peel off, exposing more meat on the underside. Eventually you'll break through the other side like so. Just continue to cut away that white tissue. On this side here, there's the kneecaps down here, there's just a lot of tissue. So what I do is just cut down basically until it starts peeling off like so. Again, assuming it's not frozen, it'll actually peel off very nicely like so. Once you get to the bottom here, kind of take your hand, there's another piece of tissue, and you're basically going to separate it from the rest of the meat like so. Here's how it looks on the other side. Just basically cut that piece away. Set that off to the side for now. We will deal with that later. Alright, now that we got that large piece off, there's some more tissue and fat in here. And trim out of the way. Right in the middle there's a big chunk for the most part, and then out here a little bit more. So again, working just on the edge, not into the meat. Dispose of that. Now, next section, there's going to be a large round chunk of meat out here, and another one here. I like to just go in on this seam right here. The actual bone is underneath it, so I'll take that, just make a slight incision until you get to the bone. Right here. That way you open up that side. Again, work on the bone because you don't want to cut into the other piece of meat. Once you get that incision by the bone, it actually kind of peels itself away. Stand it up here, follow that seam basically all the way off the meat. So. And there's the bone, right? Follow that bone's edge. The meat will almost peel off completely on its own. Now if you notice, on this side, there's that seam I was talking about. Cut into that edge. Start peeling. You can actually stick your finger between it. Basically start peeling away that edge. And now this chunk of meat is removed. Set that aside for now. Depending on how good you take the deer off the animal, the quarter off the animal, there's another chunk of meat right here. Typically set this aside for grinding because we eat a lot of grind and it's not really substantial enough to do anything with. You could take this thing and chop it up into pieces for us, stew or whatnot, but usually we grind that. Now you'll be left with basically 3 sections of meat. This lower part of the leg, which all of this gets ground up, it has a lot of tissue in it that's very difficult to cook through and tough. So what I'll do with that, I don't really concern myself with how you remove the meat off this part of the bottom part of the leg. Just take your knife and get it up against the bone and just start cutting away at the meat. Piece of ground. This has a lot of tissue in it, as you can tell. You don't want to try to eat that or grill or anything like that because you're going to have a lot of tough meat. Then continue with your knife, peeling off all the meat off the bone. So, and down to the bone, away. And some more ground pieces. We'll go through later and we'll clean off anything that I've left behind. All right, now that we've cleaned off the bottom section here, we'll do a little bit better job later down there. You'll notice there's a piece of meat basically around the actual hip bone. And the way I like to get rid of that, kneecap right here. Take your knife, go around the kneecap, and what you're going to do, basically going to shave the meat off the bone, nice short strokes against the bone, not into the meat. Do it right. Get all that meat off the bone. All right, so now it's more or less the meat that comes off of a rear quarter on a deer. Again, starting from the bottom of the leg, you've got these 2 pieces that are below the kneecap, and they're full of sinew, as you can tell. Stick these in for the grind. This comes off the top. Again, it's a small piece. You can do something with it if you want. We usually grind it up because there's plenty of other chunks of meat. Now, 3 large pieces that come off. We'll start with the first one we took off, which is that long flap almost, as you call it. I don't know the actual name of the meat pieces, but you will notice that here when you flip it, this is the outside, this is the inside. There's going to be this chunk of meat that looks like a tenderloin. Again, following the seams in the actual muscle, not the actual, don't cut through the meat. You'll be able to pull that off. Gives you a nice little chunk like that. Usually say if you don't want to grind it, you can save it and make some roasts out of it, chunk it up for stew. So that comes out of there. That's one piece. Now you have that larger piece that came off the top. Usually what we do with this is or depends on who you ask, I like to take this chunk right here and leave it as a roast. So there's this flap right here. Just take that, cut that off, nice and square. Grind. Backside here, there's more. Just basically cut it off. You can save that if you want to put it for chunks for stew, but you're left with this nice piece here. You'll notice how it's thin at the top. I cook stuff fairly rare, so this will be burnt and this will be nice, but instead of losing this meat, I just take it, cut it like that. That goes in the grind, and now you have a nice chunk of meat that you could roast up. If you want to clean this thing up nicely, you would take this silver skin right here and basically work your way, get that off, clean some more of the fat off, and then you would have a nice little chunk there. All right, next piece that we took off, this is the next one I'm going to clean up. If you remember when we took the flap off of that first section, this was on the inside. You flip it to the outside, and actually you can take your finger, and there's a piece of meat that goes over the top of it here. Work your way out. Notice that tissue, cut away at that tissue. cap of meat here. Put that in the grind pile. Now, you'll notice there's actually a seam here that has another piece of meat. You could actually pull it off with your fingers if you want to. At the bottom, just take your knife and cut through the last bit. Another chunk similar to the other piece that we had. If you want to use it for, where'd that piece go? So, similar to this, nice chunk of meat. You can use it for stew, whatever. Piece of meat. You can grind it. That's what we typically do. Now you have another portion of the rear quarter. I like to leave this one as is. I might trim off that little narrow part at the top like so, because it won't cook well if you try to cook it like a steak or a roast, and basically have another nice chunk of meat. Alright, this is the last piece we took off. This actually was the one we shaved off the back of the bone. It's shaped like a football if you look. The way I typically do this, if you notice, there's a chunk of meat right here, and then the rest of it is actually one large piece. So what I'll do, find that seam in the meat right there, make a small incision, use your fingers if you have to, use your knife to help you, basically cut that off. Now you have one large piece of meat. On the inside, this is where the bone was running. There'll be some more pieces similar to the outside that you want to pull off. So the bone was here. There's another seam here. You can see that coming down here. Make a slight incision there. You can actually, or you can work from the outside. There's that seam right there. Cut into that. Pull that piece off. It goes all the way to the top. It's got some connective tissue there. Cut that into meat a little bit. Another piece that goes in the grind pile. And you are left with this chunk of meat. And take it. There's some more meat on the top here. Just take it and go ahead and clean that piece off. That goes in the grind pile. And then, yeah, another piece of roast. What I'll typically do if you want to make, say, any sort of like tacos or something, I'll take this piece, set it down, and I'll make 1-inch thick slits out of it like that. You can get probably 3 or 4 of them out of this. Has a bit of connective tissue in there. That seems to be the best way to cook that. Or if you want, you can even continue to break this thing down more and open it up and pull even more meat off. Again, it's all in individual tissues. Kind of depends on what you want to do. You can break this down into smaller pieces, but at some point it starts getting too small to cook as a large roast. So that's that. And that is how you butcher a rear quarter. Yep, so there's your tray of meat, empty bone, and that is how you debone a rear quarter.
I want to thank everybody for watching. If you like what you saw in this video, hit that like button, comment down below, and please consider subscribing to Anthony's Outdoors for more informational tips like this. And as always, thanks for watching.